Aloha and welcome once again to the Hawaii Vacation Connection. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Bruce Fisher, also known as Aloha Bruce. We got a great podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the difference between Oahu and Maui. Especially if you're a first-timer, you might be deciding on which of these two islands to visit, so I'm going to talk about that as we get through the big show. Of course, this podcast is just not hosted by a wannabe social media influencer, somebody that's just looking for SEO, guys out there doing these podcasts who think they know about Hawaii, and they really don't. They don't know how to book Hawaii vacations. They've never booked a Hawaii vacation in their life, but they claim to be experts, and they have these guests on there, and, it's starting to get really diluted, the space, but I've been here since the beginning. This is my 18th year in podcasting, so you can judge for yourself who really knows what they're talking about and who doesn't as we get through the big show. I needed to get that out of my system. It's so frustrating to see all these podcasters. Anyway, let's get into it. We're in Hawaii. We're Hawaii's experts, so you can catch us on the web at hawaii-aloha.com. Or when I say we've got several agents here that are standing by, ready to take your call, ready to talk about how to plan your Hawaii vacation. Get over to our website. We use AI on our website. You go to the trip planner and we can just take your thoughts, just put in a few things, and then we're going to give you, just a basic idea of what the vacation is going to look like. It goes a little bit further than what you would get on ChatGPT because we've prompted it to do so, and it's kind of learning, and it gives you prices and ranges and gives you some great suggestions, but nothing replaces us getting back into the booking. So once you do that, then you're going to get assigned an agent who's going to interact with you. If you don't want to do that, okay, you're on your own, but most people tell us that they really do appreciate the added value of having somebody here in Hawaii, a local business that's surviving because, they're trying to, like cockroaches, they want to kill us. And we understand pricing, and we always will get you the best bang for the buck. Chances are we'll either match or beat what you have, but if you're transparent with us and you really see the value in what we're doing, we're going to make this great. I know I do. I bend over backwards for folks that want to work with me and can see the value. All right, let's talk about it. Let me bring you some value today. Let's take a quick look at Oahu versus Maui. If you like a little bit of everything, beaches, history, food, nightlife, easy transits, then you want to lean to Oahu. This is pretty common knowledge. If you'd rather slow it down, maybe just be in a resort corridor. Let's say you're a waterfall chaser and scenic drives and you don't mind renting a car and taking long drives, then, Maui is for you. Both are actually very similar in size. Maui is 728 square miles and Oahu is about 600 square miles, but they feel very different. Oahu carries most of Hawaii's population. It has the good big energy, feel to it. And it's really just a fun place to hang out. Sometimes I know I might get criticism of that, but it's kind of the vibe on Oahu now in this, the way it feels is kind of like Oahu's the new Maui, especially since Maui has gone through some tough times and rough seas, but that's all changing. That's all changing really fast. So I'm going to walk back that really quick for you. But Maui does have a smaller town, spread out feel, around a lot of the beach destinations. And if you look at Maui on the map, it looks kind of like a figure eight sideways. And, like smack in the middle, you've got Lihue in the airport and then it kind of spreads out to two, like a figure. It really does look like a figure eight. Maui is the second largest island in the chain. And it really, it is spread out. And that's one of the things that, that density kind of shows up in everything there. From the restaurant, the density to both islands show up, depending on which island you're on, especially on Oahu when we talk about traffic, which I'm going to get into. Let's talk about the difference between like Waikiki and Ka'anapali, because over the years, I just feel like they're getting very similar. I don't know if any of you who've been here before and have taken several trips here can validate what I'm saying, that over the years, Ka'anapali kind of feels like Waikiki in some sense. If you think of Waikiki as Honolulu's oceanfront neighborhood with high-rise hotels, shopping, shows, and, we've got that 2.5-mile stretch of beach, and kind of cut into different sections. You got Kuhio, Queens, Royal Hawaiian, etc. And if you go to my blog, and we have all the beaches there kind of explained if you want to see that. It's kind of unapologetically urban beach feel. Now, Ka'anapali, granted, it's a little bit longer. It's a 3-mile stretch. It's along the resort line on a kind of a beachfront path. You can go snorkeling right directly at beach, Black Rock, which you can't do anywhere. Well, there's maybe a couple spots you can do it on in Waikiki, but not really like you can at Black Rock. And there's sunset catamarans on both, but on Maui, I think it's a little more spectacular, but it does get this similar all-in-one holiday busy experience. Granted, the buildings aren't as large, but those hotels are pretty big hotels, and it's a stretch of beach. So that's pretty much the biggest kind of difference that I can tell you between Waikiki and, let's say, Ka'anapali, which I think are two similar places. I'm not going to put Wailea in there because Wailea is kind of like its own story, if you will, and that's kind of on the south side. But down there, you have more of a remote resort feel, but the prices are just so expensive, and you're kind of confined to that area. You can go into Kihei and that sort of thing. But what I love about Waikiki is it's just so walkable, right? Even Honolulu is a walkable destination. You can just walk and just see stuff, and experience things. You really can't do that. You don't have that kind of feel in Maui. And, it really just depends on your vacation style when it comes to that. So let's talk about beaches, because this is always comes up about the difference of beaches. And if you ever heard the famous singer and artist Israel Kamakawiwo'ole, I kind of think that song, White Sandy Beach, I think it's calling to Oahu, even though, both islands have amazing beaches. They're also not equal in number or in the coastline themselves, because Maui has 120 to 130 miles of shoreline and 30 plus miles of beaches. And Oahu kind of has different kind of data, but the point stands. You're going to find plenty of beaches on both, just not the same count or character, because they're just different. I don't know how I'm trying to explain it. The other thing is just beaches in general in Hawaii are all public access beaches along the shoreline. And that means they're very accessible. So you'll find paths, and I can tell you where to go, and you probably can ChatGPT find it. I mean, everything I'm saying probably you can find. I've been feeding the beast for so long. I think when I go on ChatGPT and I look this stuff up, they're like repeating what I've been saying for 100 years. But anyway, the sand color is kind of a big thing. I get people that want to see black sand, white sand, gold sand. They want red sand, they want green sand. People want different colors of beach, which I don't know. I guess that's a thing. But I can tell you that Maui, of course, has the famous Black Rock Beach at Waipanapanapa Beach Park. That's right near Hana. There's a lot of reservations that are required, and go back and read all of my posts about going to Hana and the different ways to do the road to Hana, because it can get a little complicated and overwhelming, and it's not for everybody, I'm sorry to say. Green Sand Beach is not on Maui. People argue with me about that. That's at Papakolea. I know I just butchered that on the Big Island that's near the South Point, and that's a really long hike, by the way. And then the Red Sand Beach is also a problem on Maui. Be very careful to do that. That's at Kaihalululu Beach. I just butchering the names today because I don't have them in front of me. I'm trying to do this spontaneously, and if I had it in front of me, I could read it perfectly. So white sand fans, go to Oahu. It punches it all. You've got Waimanalo. Those white sands beaches, Hawaii, you're going to find there. Ko'olina, Kailua, Lanikai, all of those beaches are spectacular. And, you might want to just punch in Israel Kamakaviviole while you're doing that and listen to them. So what about waterfalls? We always get the waterfall of volcano. I'll talk about the volcano thing later, just as a pro tip. All the Hawaiian Islands are made up of volcanoes, okay? Probably the whole world is, right, at some point. But Oahu has dormant volcanoes. All the islands have dormant volcanoes except for the big island. Don't want to digress there. But waterfalls, if you want multiple like roadside waterfalls in a single day, Maui totally wins on that one. Hana Highway, which I just mentioned, strings together just so many view from the bridge or short hikes to some of the most amazing waterfalls. Upper Waikani is really a very popular place. Three Bears, Wailua Falls, Puaka'a is another one. Some of these places you can swim, you can, it just depends on safety and just be careful. Oahu should not be ruled out with waterfalls. The problem is, a lot of people go to Manoa Falls. There's a lot of people, but what's nice about it is a beautiful rainforest and it's close to Waikiki, and there are other ones as well. There's Waimea Valley that fall, but, I have to say that, waterfalls aren't as easily accessible here on Oahu, but I can tell you where they are. Lakeke Falls is one. Lulumalu. There's a few of them here that you can get to, but you just got to know what you're doing and talk to people here and learn about that. As far as scenic coast drives, you might want to put that like comparison in there, while Maui, of course, has the Hana Highway, and that just beautiful 639 turns, it's just gorgeous. We have on Oahu the Ka'ivi Coast between Hanauma Bay and Makapu'u and all the way through Waimanalo, which is a beautiful scenic drive and definitely not as long as some of the other ones. Nightlife. Let's talk about that a little bit because I get that question too. Where can I get some? Obviously, you probably can already know it's Oahu, Waikiki, downtown, Chinatown, all have bars that are open late, and there's live music, and we've got Blue Note, and we've got Cirque du Soleil here now. So there's just tons of stuff. Also getting around on Oahu, and I want to get into this a little bit because of the traffic questions I get a lot. Getting around. Typically, Oahu, you don't have to spend the day behind the wheel to see a lot here, especially if you're based in Waikiki. You can rent a car just for a day or two. You don't need it for the entire time. But I'm encouraging people lately to do more driving here. I'm almost like saying almost in all of my itineraries now, a day or two of a car is not a bad idea on Oahu. And with Oahu, it makes sense to kind of split the island into like shorter drives. So you could like do a North Shore drive and not have to spend like 10 hours, go to the North Shore. And then you could do a South Shore tour, just like make it a half a day going, Hawaii Kai, where I live out here. And then maybe do a West Side run and do a sunset out there. Most of this is going to be less than a 45-minute drive. And so there's plenty of opportunity to do that. And, on Oahu, we do have much more rideshare availability, but only really in the Waikiki general area, maybe a little bit out to the south side. We do have that trolley here, which actually is pretty good to get around. You have a hop on, hop off situation. They have the red line, the blue line, and I think the green line. I forget which three lines, and they all go to different places. You can even go downtown and visit the palace. I do that a lot for my clients who are like really love museums, and I put them on that trolley for that. But the idea of renting a car has to be in play on Maui. The headline experiences are all day commitments. I'm sorry, you just have to spend the whole day to do them. The road to Honda, it's 64 miles. It can easily take 10 hours round trip with stops, obviously. Haleakala, either sunrise or sunset, looping in up country with it, eats up most of your day. You can't really squeeze them in. And, it's not like Oahu where you can kind of separate it as much. So traffic, how does handling traffic happen? Now that we're talking about driving around Oahu, and everybody here is going to tell you, We have some of the worst traffic in the world, and some of the worst drivers. I mean, I sometimes get so frustrated on the road because people here just drive slower. I mean, I've been here for 30 years, but I still have a pedal to the metal type of mentality with my car. I just, and people here tend to just do it on the opposite, like instead of being on the left lane on the mainland in most places in the United States, and, we pass on the left, right? I think that's even a rule at the DMV. You pass on the left. Here, it's the exact opposite. People go slower in the left lane and faster in the right lane. And, I've gotten really good about commuting because I could time almost perfectly, how to get to the right lane, the left lane, and where people, it becomes a science, but you don't really have to worry about that. You're on vacation. And I always tell people, if you're in traffic, wait 20 or 30 minutes, it'll be over. Traffic doesn't really last that long. But it does kind of feel like LA with palm trees in a sense. We have almost 1 million residents here in the island and a lot of daily commuters. There's a lot of choke points, if you will, where we get bottlenecks. H1, H2, and H3 often back up in the mornings at certain get-offs. Mauna Lua is one. Where we do have merges, because the city was never built and the roads were never built for the kind of volume that these roads carry. Typically in the morning, 6 to 8:30 a.m., and then in the afternoons, 3:30 to 6 p.m. Of course, special events, North Shore Surf, one big traffic jam up north will just kill you, and that's why we generally tell people to head out north first and then come around the other way. And just kind of maybe even avoid some of these very heavy traffic times, like 3 to 6, obviously is very busy here. But coming from the airport in the afternoons, if you're flying in to Oahu from the mainland and you get in about 2:30 to 3:30, one of those afternoon flights, get ready for a heavy drive in. And even if you're ride sharing or taking a shuttle, and I have to say, it's not the greatest first impression when you come out of the airport from Oahu and you have to go through this kind of industrial area, and it looks kind of ghetto in some places. I don't understand why we haven't been able to make that more beautiful so that our first impression of visitors coming here is, would be nicer. It's kind of the same in Maui. There's really no freeway grid there at all. So traffic will build up in a lot of the predictable choke points, from Lahaina to Kaanapali, Kihei's main road, those get really kind of backed up. And especially since the fires and a lot of the construction that's been going on, it can get really bad. Last time I was in Maui, it took me 2 hours to get from Kaanapali all the way to Wailea, because they were just trucks. It was just normal traffic. And that can happen. And every island has traffic. So the best time to drive around on Oahu, the better window is 9:30 to 11:30 in the morning, and early in the afternoon, 1 to 3 p.m. I think is pretty safe. On Maui, the West Maui commute 7 to 9 a.m. and then 4 to 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon. Road to Hana, better midday. The easiest travel times on Maui is going to be before 7 o'clock in the morning in general. Now, if you're in Wailea, it really also depends on where you're staying. If you're in Wailea, it's a little bit easier to get to those places, or in Kihei. So, but a lot of you are staying in Kaanapali, so try to get out really early in the morning, or even in the late afternoon if you want to do something later that might work. But sometimes that 3 p.m. traffic is not good coming out of Kaanapali. So I'm all over the place about the traffic. It's kind of not predictable on Maui there, especially with all that's been going on. So let's just talk about prices for a second, because Maui comes in a lot more expensive than Oahu. 1 week trip is about 30% less on Oahu when comparing to similar experiences. When I look back in 2024, I saw the hotel rates were about $284 nights on Oahu as compared to $544 on Maui. The price differential hasn't really changed, with Wailea being the most expensive place, really getting way up there between, almost $1,000 a night. So overall, Oahu's rates are going to be about 21 to 30% lower on the average than Maui. And luxury people, if you want to go over the top and you're like that, then I would definitely be talking about doing Wailea. It's just gorgeous. My favorite hotel down there is the Fairmont Keilani. God, this is a longer podcast than I expected, but I just have so much to share when we're comparing islands. And it's something that I've been wanting to do for you for a while, is try to compare and contrast all the islands. So I'm going to do a series of these. But one thing I wanted to mention really quickly is the food scene here on Oahu. Hands down, Oahu is the foodie paradise. There's over 1,000 restaurants probably on Oahu. I mean, last time I checked, over 1,000 restaurants in Hawaii alone. Like 800 of those are on Oahu. It's really the foodie island, and there's just a lot of variety here, from food trucks to some of the greatest fine dining and casual cafes. And please take a look at my ultimate guide to restaurants in Waikiki and my ultimate guide to restaurants on Maui. I broke them down. Both of them I actually did break down into the type of food and how much you could expect to spend. And some of the more affordable places, especially in Waikiki, where you can get sucked into these restaurants that are ridiculously expensive, especially the hotels. I have to say, these hotel prices, $24 hamburgers, without anything, and then a drink, you're spending $100 to eat a burger, come on, let's get real. I don't care how much money you have. You don't want to spend that kind of money on burgers. So if waterfalls, scenic driving, and reef from the beach snorkeling are the core to your dream, then Maui. If variety, beaches, culture, nightlife, food, and shorter drives is your goal, then Oahu. And, the other thing I wanted to mention just in general, and I probably say this so much, but don't do Oahu and Maui. All right. Just don't do it, because you can see what I'm talking about, the similarities, right? There isn't a huge contrast between the two. Obviously, if you have to do these bucket list things, then do it. But if you really want to pick two islands, I wouldn't always vote for Oahu Maui combination. I would combine Oahu with Big Island or Kauai and Maui. Each combination is leaving Oahu and Maui separate from the other islands. So hopefully this is going to help you out. Definitely reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. We're trying to increase things here, increase engagement, something I'm not very good at, because I came from a radio background. It was always one way in those days, and we never had to really respond except if somebody called in on the talk show. So I know that this is one of the things that has been my downfall, if you will, because I've lost all of my social media mojo pretty much, because, back in the day, I was the only person doing this stuff and videos and everything. And then, and then I was on social media, and then I just got so overwhelmed with it. I just stopped doing it, thinking that I would be able to somehow bring it back. But, for those of you who are into social media, once you lose it, you lose it. It's like use it or lose it. And I lost pretty much all my social media mojo. However, I am pretty strong on Facebook, and also, if, the podcast obviously or questions. So if you do write to me, I will write you back, and I will give you my unabashed opinion. You may not like my opinion. People get mad at me sometimes because I tell them the truth, and they don't like they don't want to hear what I'm saying. They have it in their mind, they want to do 4 islands and they want to spend 2 nights on each island, and they get mad at me when I say you don't do that. Some lady just got really upset with me because I was just, like I'm the Larry David of Hawaii Vacations. I'm going to tell you the truth. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that why you're listening? And that's why we're, I think, better than these other, quote, expert, best podcast Hawaii things. Come on. All right. That's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. Don't forget to check out our website, hawaii-aloha.com. Check out the podcast page, the blogs. Also, if you're interested in tours, check out Secret Hawaii Tours. They're kind of our sister company. And make sure you reach out to me personally. 1-800-843-8771 is the number. Okay. That's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. For my beautiful wife, Ya-Ling, and all of us here at Hawaii Aloha Travel, I'll say aloha and mahalo.